Yo guys, this is Wim for the Melodic Techno Academy, and today we will recreate a melodic techno track in the style of Massano. And before we get started, I want to show you the full template that I arranged for you guys. Let's have a look at the key elements of a Massano track. First of all, his tracks are starting out with a very punchy kick and a rather deep and subby bass line. And this bass has usually no high frequencies at all. He's just using, for example, a sine wave to create this really subby and dark atmosphere. And by doing that, he is also leaving some room for his really outstanding and powerful lead sound design, which he's mostly creating in serum and pigments. And for his leads, he's also using very often the arpeggiator, and we're also gonna make use of that today in the tutorial. And in his tracks, we can also find a lot of acid synth sounds and usually very unique oscillators, sound design in general. So let's finally have a look at it and jump into Ableton. Let's get started with the kick and bass. And as I said earlier, the kick and bass is usually not too complex. We just have a very punchy kick. So I found this sample here, and usually we want to have it quite short because we're also working with a sub bass, and this sub bass, as you can already see here, is always hitting offbeat. So the kick is hitting over here, and every time the sub bass is coming in here offbeat, and so we don't want to have the kick too long so they're not fighting with each other here. And I actually didn't add any processing here, as you can see, so it's very important to find the right sample here straight away or just do some minor adjustments like shortening up the decay here. And I actually listened to some of Massano's tracks, and I could hear in one track that he had a very nice texture on his kick here, and that sometimes happens from some distortion that you apply on your kick, some kind of crunchiness in the higher frequencies here, but sometimes you can also try to use some samples to layer on top of your kick. The only thing, of course, that is very important that you also cut out all of the lower frequencies here that we already have in our main kick. And I actually used the plug-in kick 2 here to find even another cool noise that we can layer on top here. So this one sounds like this. So we don't want to have any rumble in here, and this is just very slightly mixed in, as you can probably already tell. And then we have this other one here where I really also shortened the kick up quite a bit. So the kick itself is not really suiting for this track because it's not punchy at all, but you can also just take some parts out of a kick and then really layer it together. So right off the bat, we are creating a much more interesting texture here in our track by adding this on the kick. And now, as I said, we have the sub bass, which is super simple. You can create this in every single plugin. I just used a very basic sine wave. I just cut it away a little bit of the higher frequencies here. And then I just added a very slight feedback over here just to fatten it up a little bit, and just added this very slight plate reverb over here, just to kind of give it a little bit more room atmosphere. And yeah, this is pretty much the whole groove here. As I said, it's very simple and it's not really playing a super big role in our track because the sub bass is really just playing in the background here until the synths are really taking over the track. But I still applied a lot of group processing here, which is quite important in that case. So first I'm gonna turn it off. So you can see we added quite a lot of punch here, especially in the lower frequencies. So let's have a look. I'm applying a little bit of compression here with my favorite compressor. Just very gently so the kick and bass are working together. Then I just added some distortion probably here. I just added a little bit of decapitator drive. Also not doing too much, and then I used this rare equalizer here where we can really boost a little bit of the lower frequencies. So for the clap sound, I listened to a couple of his tracks, and the clap or snare is already quite important in his tracks, and it's most of the time a very punchy snare, or for example like this one, a very crunchy and full sounding clap. So you can already see I used a lot of samples in here. Let's have a look what is going on here. We have 4 different samples. Those are all different clap samples. And then we have this noise here layered on top, which is not really part of the clap itself, but I used it to give a little bit more groove to the track. You can see this sometimes spaced in between here, and also I played around with the velocities. And sometimes it's nice to have it in front of the clap, so it's kind of guiding us into this clap hit. And sometimes it's also cool to lay it together with the clap, and it's already making a way more interesting groove here. And you can also see we have some double clap hits over here that can also make a groove sometimes a bit more interesting. And you can also see we added quite a lot of processing. I just turned down the width quite a bit, and I've already said this in a couple tutorials. It's quite a nice technique to meld together some different samples, because you might be using some different samples from different packs here, and they all kind of have their own processing, reverb and all that stuff applied. So sometimes it's really easy to just take some stereo width out and then they're already melting together. So then we added just some slight distortion. This can also really help to glue your claps and everything together. And then actually I started working with the grain delay, and I actually used this before I added the white noise sound here. So I just wanted to have some difference between the first clap hit and the second one. And you can hear this better actually when we also turn the white noise off first. So on the first clap hit we're adding some grain delays here, and then the second one is coming in dry. And this is just a really easy and fast technique to make your clap grooves way more interesting. So afterwards we have this noise hi-hat, which also sounds very interesting. So you can already see we added some cool automations in here on the release and decay time. And this works especially great towards the end when we are right in front of a drop. We can always use those sounds to create some extra tension in the track. Here I even added a slight delay at the end to kind of fade it out and make it more spacey at the end. And this head sound is a preset from a new preset pack that I'm working on right now. And it's a very simple sound where we just have a noise and a little bit of resonance on the filter, and then the envelope here is quite important. We have a little bit more release here, and this becomes quite useful when we want to create the groove in here, because usually you would think if you want to add an accent and have a longer note in here, you would also extend it out a bit, but because of the release it's quite different. We can use shorter notes to kind of have them releasing longer over the time. So you can see this sometimes here. I added those super short notes, and when I play this now you will hear that those ones are actually the long one. And of course we also added the automations on top. But yeah, this is a really nice technique to add some more groove to your drums. And then I used this auto pan. This time I put it in the sync mode actually. So it's always moving in tune to the track. And then we also just wanted to have the higher frequencies in here. And we also added a little bit more grain delay to just have it not so super dry and a little bit more organic and moving. And also sometimes a nice arrangement technique is to not just bring in your new drums here perfectly on the new bar. I really like to use this sometimes to just have a very simple gain automation here coming in slightly, and so the new drums are coming in a bit smoother over here. So let's have a look at this percussion layer, which sounds really nice in my opinion. It's coming in straight from the beginning of the track, and yeah, it's playing pretty much all the way, just in the break. We're not really using it. Without it, the track sounds quite empty already from the beginning. And it's just nice to have already a little groove element playing straight from the beginning. And this time I just used one sample from a new sample pack that I'm also working on right now. And here it's also quite important to just add a little bit of processing afterwards. I just added some distortion again to kind of have it a bit more organic and interesting. And then also added a delay here, which is just really helping with the groove here. And this time I actually not used an auto pan, but I went in here into the controls, and then I wanted to put in the pan movement this time by myself, because it's just a little bit nicer to have control over every single sample here. And without it, it also sounds quite boring. So those percussion sounds are really nice, and we are also using this straight in front of the second drop here, for example. Where we just have this synth layer playing and also the percussion, and yeah, it's already giving us a nice preview of what is coming, and it's just adding some nice groove in here. And then I have a little snare build up going on, but nothing too crazy. We just automated the volume a little bit. We did some auto filter movements to fade it out, and that's basically it. We just have also a very basic groove here, and then later going into the 16th pattern. And then I actually used this noise hi-hat, which you've probably already heard in some of my tutorials. This one is actually from my Patreon preset pack here. And I just recorded a little sequence here, did some velocity movements, and then you can also play around with the filter, of course. For this stuff, I really recommend you to just have your keyboard ready and just record a little sequence. When you're just putting it in with your mouse, it's kind of hard to figure out where's the right spot. But when you just record a little longer sequence, then go back in here and kind of quantize it, it most of the time works way better and you create way more interesting sequences here. And yeah, this is already it for the drums. Usually Massano's drums are also not too complex. We don't have so many elements in here, and he's rather using a bit more of a minimalistic approach, where we just have a really punchy clap or snare, some interesting hi-hats, and usually also a nice interesting percussion sound. And the group processing is also very minimal, just some basic compression here. But finally, let's go to the more interesting part, which is of course the very unique sound design by Massano. And you can already see there's quite some stuff in the main lead folder here. So let's play those synths one more time together. And actually when I was planning out this video, I already thought that Massano might be using a lot of serum because you can definitely hear it in his tracks. So I hit him up on Instagram and he replied saying that he's mostly using serum and also pigments, and that's exactly what we're gonna use today. So let's have a look at the first lead here. So to get started with such a lead design, it's very good to already start with the arpeggiator because it's just very easy to get some more complex sounding notes. And then you can already see that we not just put it in the 16th mode, we also did some automations here to get some more complex sounding patterns here. So we are going to a little bit faster rate here, then we are slowing it down to 1/8, then also a little bit of a faster one here, and back to a slower one over here, as you can see. And the melody is also not too complex really. We are in the D minor scale here, so we're working a lot with the root note obviously, and then sometimes we're going up here to A sharp and also to C. And this simple melody is already creating the basic structure of our track because we're using the same here also, for example, in the plug sound mainly, and also in the lead sounds later. So for a track like this, you really don't need so much melodic knowledge. Sometimes 3 notes can be enough for your whole track. But let's have a look at the sound design, which is probably a bit more interesting. As you can see, we have used quite a lot of oscillators here, 3 to be exact, and then we also laid a little bit of noise here. So first I started out with this acid sound here, which I think Massano might be using also. You can hear it probably, and you can play around with the position here quite a lot to get some different sounds. So with that one, we're definitely getting to the right direction. And then I wanted to beef it up a little bit and also add some more higher frequencies here. So we added a 2-octave higher oscillator here. And you can already see it in the name. The saw sound is a little bit dirtier than a normal one, and I think it's nice to add some more texture to your sound. So those 2 here are already creating quite a nice sound, but I also wanted to have a little bit more punch in the lower frequencies here. So I even went 2 octaves lower to add this basic saw wave on top. And you can see this one is quite important. And in general, if you want to have some more fat sounds, it's always good to use different oscillators in different octave modes. Of course, we could use the unison mode, but this time we don't really need it because we don't want to have it smooth. We want to have it a bit more aggressive and more with texture in the higher frequencies. So I used this one. We also added a little bit of filtering, but just a very slight one on the higher frequencies. And also we added some cutoff automations here, but not really changing too much here. Also the FX section here is very basic, it's not doing too much. Just a little bit more distortion here, some very slight delay and also reverb. And then I wanted to take it a couple steps further here. And you can use the redux effect here quite nicely to add some more distortion. And I really like to play around with it since the new Ableton version, because now you finally also have the dry and wet option here. So it's really easy to just play around with this and come up with a nice texture for hi-hats, also for lead sounds. And let's have a look what it's doing. So I hope you could hear that. There's some nice noise and crispiness going on in the higher frequencies. And then I even took the decapitator again to add even a little bit more drive, but it's not so important this time. And here we just have a redux which I automated later because we're not doing too much with the lead here. We're not doing so many crazy automations here with the cutoff or anything. So usually the lead is always the same in the track, but at the end I wanted to switch it up a bit and also show you guys some options what you can do with this sound. So first of all, I automated here the oscillator position from the acid oscillator, and this is changing the sound already quite a lot. And then I also played around with the release time over here, and at some stages I also added a little bit of the echo send that I always have ready in my send effects here, and it's just adding some more spacey feelings in here. And it's some really nice additions sometimes to just have some very short automations, or especially at the end to kind of fade out a lead or guide us kind of in a new part. So let's have a look here how those automations sound. So especially the last one here sounds quite cool in the track. And yeah, the Redux here, the second one I actually just used over here. I wanted to do something special and not just have a basic drop coming in here. So I also worked with the first lead layer here. So yeah, I just wanted to show you what is possible here with some very simple automations. First of all, we actually pitched this note down, I think 1 or 2 octaves here to have it hitting a bit lower. And then we also changed the rate up here quite a bit. So we're going to a bit of a faster rate, and especially here, this one doesn't really sound like a synth anymore. And then we use this Redux effect to make it also a bit more interesting. You can hear this frequency which is going down. I'm gonna turn it off first. So this is also really nice to play around to create some build-ups or some more interesting synth sounds like this. And yeah, this is basically already it for this little drop section here. And yeah, afterwards we just have some minor compression here with this one. This one is a bit softer from Arturia and it's not so fast and aggressive. So I used this one this time, and then we just have some basic sidechaining at the end. But you could probably already hear that we also have another layer which is introducing the first synth here. And this is especially important because we are introducing the first lead layer here quite abruptly, and we are not really fading it in before this is a completely new melody which is coming here. So it's nice to have at least something that is introducing the lead a little bit. So what I did is just to turn all of the delay effects and all of that off. Then I just added a lot of reverb, and then you usually just want to have the first note playing, and then you just record that. And then you just resample that in Ableton, and then you can just go into your sample and reverse it, and then you already have this super nice kind of sucking in effect. And also I go back in here into the stereo width and take a little bit away of it. We don't want to have it really sounding like a reversed reverb. We rather want to have it sounding like a synth. So I take a little bit away. That really helps a lot. And at the end I usually like to add also a little bit of reverb, so the sound is also fading out a little bit. And you can use those reverse sounds even a lot more in your track. Sometimes you don't really need to have the lead coming in afterwards. And for example, the same I did here to guide us into the next part of the section where we actually introduce some different synth sounds here. So yeah, as I said, you don't really need to use it in combination here. And then I actually duplicated the first layer here. And as I said, Massano is using a lot of the arpeggiator mode, which we already used. But you can also hear this classic rate movements in this arpeggiator synth, which are not synced this time. We want to put it in the free mode so we can change the milliseconds here. And then I just recorded a little movement over here. And what I also did was changing the oscillator position here up also from the first one. So we are moving it more into the acid area when we're turning this one up. And of course, this lead sound is quite aggressive. So I needed to add a lot of reverb at the end to kind of make it a bit more spacey and more of an atmospheric element. And then I also added a slight volume automation here to kind of have it fading in a bit more. And on top of that, the most important here is the auto filter, because we're sweeping this down from a high frequency range here to a rather low one. So let's solo this real quick. So quite a cool sound. Another thing that I did here is just put in some pan movement by hand here. And I used this lead sound here to kind of guide us also into the main part here of the break, where some more elements are coming in. And before that, it's quite empty. We just have this pad atmosphere going on, and also this acid hit is coming in sometimes. But it's really a nice introduction for the new part of the break here. now actually I want to go back into the drums, because you could probably hear this, that I use the clap sound here sometimes more as an atmospheric element, and this is only possible if you also add some more effect sounds here. And I automated quite a lot of send reverb here, my super big hall reverb that I have on the first one. Then I also added some shimmer, which is this super long and high frequency reverb, and then I also added this echo delay here, which is creating quite a nice atmosphere here. And I used this multiple times here in the track. And also we added the noise layer here, which works quite nice in the break. I only took the frequency down a little bit more here. And also this noise layer here is working together very often with the acid hit that we have in here. So that is just a very interesting way here to create some more complex and interesting sounding synths, is to just experiment with some drum sounds and definitely make them groove together. And by the way, the same thing I did with the noise hi-hat here. You can see I have this groove, and this is not just a random groove. I really tried to make this noise hat here really work together with the plug sound that we have in the track. So let's play them together one time. So it might be a bit hard to see in the MIDI here actually, but maybe you can already hear that I tried to implement a similar groove here in the hi-hat to the synth sound. And if you want to know more about this, I already made a tutorial about this, which I will link in the top right corner here. It's really how to create more groove in your track, and this is always accomplished by creating sounds that are working together. So with hi-hat and drum sounds in general, you always want to add to the groove which is already in the track. And this time, yeah, I used the plug sound here as the reference. And so they are really nicely grooving together. But let's go back to the lead sound here, because there's a second one going on. And this is actually two different ones which are layered here. And I actually started out just duplicating the first layer here, and I did some minor adjustments here. For example, with the wavetable position, we added quite a strong envelope here. So you can see here we're getting really into this acid sound, and this oscillator here works really nice for that. And then I also wanted to add a little bit more acid sound here by using the filter. So I boosted the resonance really a lot and also took the cutoff here slightly down, and we added a little bit of drive here. And then we actually added a second filter here. So we're emphasizing really the lower frequencies here, and it seems quite important for that sound. So now we're getting really more of this acid sound, which is quite hard to get out of some synthesizers, but this time we were getting quite close. But then I really recognized we need to add quite a lot more drive here on the decapitator, and works really nice most of the time to combine your acid sounds also with some heavy distortion. And you can really try a couple different distortion units here, which really work the best because they all have completely different sound. So this one is already doing quite a lot of work. So really adding some nice distortion, and yeah, the rest is kind of the same, but this acid sound was really lacking a lot of punch and didn't really sound that great in the mix. So as I said earlier, Massano is using a lot of pigments too, so I tried to have a look in here and had a look at some presets. You can just go in here and just kind of choose the acid tab and really have a look at a lot of presets. So that's exactly what I did. I just did a couple adjustments here, so let's have a look real quick. So it doesn't really sound like an acid sound, but then again we added quite a lot of distortion, which is already doing quite a bit. And then I added the pedal effect, which works really nice and able to add some really extreme distortion. So most of the time you also want to turn it down quite a bit and then just mix it in very slightly, and it works really nice to add some higher frequencies too. So here it's really getting too much, but it's really nice to add this, higher frequencies than just some basic EQing, some more high frequencies, side chaining, and then it seems like we added some compression afterwards. And yeah, alone they don't really sound that great in the track, but when we put them together, they work really nicely and create this nice punchy acid sound. So yeah, those acid sounds are really hard to nail if you don't have the right synthesizer. So yeah, just play around with some presets, some crazy distortion units and all that stuff, and then you can probably come up with something cool. And the MIDI here is not too complex, just some very short notes here drawn in by hand. The only thing that gets a bit more interesting here that we also added some cool automations here at the end, where we're moving the frequency of the cutoff here up. And also we added some more delay and reverb effects here at the end. And this is not the only acid sound that we have in the track. I also created this really nice atmospheric sound, which we're using really from the beginning on here, and actually used the second auto filter here to introduce it a little bit more here in the beginning. And then we also have some cut-off automations and also again the oscillator position. And this is really more of a spacey element here, which comes in quite dark over here, and then it gets a bit brighter. So really cool and interesting sound. This time we added some more advanced filtering here with the PP12 filter, where we have some nice resonances in here, boosted all the way actually. We also used a lot of drive, and then we used this oscillator here, where we also added this envelope automation here, and it creates this really nice moving sound. And the second oscillator is not really that important. Just a basic saw wave, and then we added also quite some distortion, some emphasis around the lower areas, and some basic delay and reverb here afterwards. So this acid sound is really used to already create some more tension and some more crazy sounds here from the intro on. And for those sounds we usually want to use quite a bit of reverb here on top. And as I said, this sound here is also working together with some of the drum sounds, and also of course I spaced it here accordingly to the lead sounds. So here the first lead is playing, then we have this acid sound which is kind of introducing the new one and also guiding us out of the second one, and together that makes up a bit of a better transition here between those two. But it also works really great alone on its own here in the track to create this big atmosphere with a lot of reverb on it. So really cool sound. By the way, if you want to grab this template here, including all the individual presets as well, there's a link for that in the description for my Patreons. But let's have a look at the next sound, which is this plug sound here, which we again created in Serum. And you can already see this again. I'm using a lot of my send reverb automations here. And again, this is a really nice and quick automation technique to create some extra tension here. But let's have a look at the synth sound. So I used similar techniques in here. We used again this dirty saw wave to create a nice texture here. And then I played around with some oscillators where I also used a little bit of unison. And I wanted to have this quite plucky and add quite a sharp transient. So I not just added the noise in the regular way. This time I used the envelope number 1 here. And you can just do this to add some extra transient here because the noise is moving down even faster now. And yeah, then we just used a simple filter here and again some distortion. We also used the chorus to make it a little bit stereo here. And yeah, this is basically already the whole sound. But of course, we also added quite some processing here, a little bit less stereo width. We added some slight compression here with this slower compressor here. I added some auto filtering, which is also nice to take a little bit of the lower frequencies here away when we are going into the build up. And right before the drop, you want to have a little bit less lower frequencies here because that makes really your drop hit harder. Because yeah, music production is always about contrast. With contrast, you can easily build some tension. So this is exactly the reason why we, for example, want to fade out the low frequencies. Also why we want to add some reverb, because here the sound is super spacey and reverbery. And then when we hit in the drop, it gets super subby in the kick and bass and also gets more dry because we don't have any super crazy delays and reverbs on this. We really want to have a hard impact on this drop here. yeah, this is the plug sound. So let's have a look. We have a pad sound here as well. And this time I actually used Diva and not Serum. And I just used one of my presets here, which is available in my free preset pack, which you can grab on my channel here. And I used also a very interesting technique here in the MIDI, as you can see. I really like to do this to not just play a basic pad melody. I just like to kind of press those notes again and again, and it creates a bit more of an interesting pattern than just kind of having extended notes. And the only thing you need to do for this is to also have quite a lot of release time here and decay time, and possibly also quite a long reverb here on top even. So the notes are really melting together, and it doesn't really sound like I'm pressing the notes multiple times, but rather it sounds like an extended chord here with a little bit more movement than usual. And really, if you add a lot of reverb, super long reverbs, it's really smoothing out all of those movements, and it already creates a nice atmosphere for some really low mixed in pads here. And we are especially using this, of course, to guide us into the break, where I actually took the same melody and just pitched it down by 1 octave, which is not really a big thing, but it makes quite a big difference because this is a bit more of a higher frequency pad here, which is playing in the background and creating a bit more drive in the track. And then we have it really fading out over here and coming in a bit darker, and then we can use it again to pitch it up over here in the more tensionful last part of the break here. So quite a simple but really effective and interesting technique. And really, guys, it's also important to leave some space here and some silence. This pad is coming in super low in the volume level and also in the frequency range here. So we really want to create some tension. And as I said, tension is created with contrast. And here we have a super loud part of the track, which is super driving and forward pushing. And then we really take it into this very quiet and atmospheric break. And then, of course, later we can introduce more elements and make it more driving again. But this is really just a play of contrast and different things here. And I even added one more lead sound to just make the track a little bit more interesting and also create some different parts of the track here. Because if you want to play this lead sound here for a longer time, it really gets a little bit too uninteresting. And especially here, I didn't want to have it playing too much because later on we're going to introduce it again on the drop. So we don't want to have it getting boring over here already. And for that reason, it's just nice to have another lead sound, which is just taking the place over here and which actually has a similar melody here. We have again the same notes that we already played before. So in this track, we really don't have so much melodic content, and that works great for more tracks like Massano or more darker melodic techno sounds where we don't want to have so much melodic emotional vibe. We want to rather have this a bit more darker atmosphere. So you can just make some really simple lead sounds here just like that. And I actually took this preset here from another video that I made from my 3 lead sounds from Afterlife's Unity Part 3. So you can grab that preset over there if you want. And I just did some very basic frequency automation here. And sounds especially great later when we open the filter here. And you can hear this also in Massano's tracks, that he's using also a lot of detune and sometimes pitch shifting. So usually you can just use a very simple vibrato effect here, which is coming from the LFO number 1. And this is already creating some nice detune, and of course the oscillators as well, creating this nice detune melodic techno sounds. And afterwards I just created some interesting swoosh sounds with white noise. I actually used analog here, which is a very simple noise layer where we just automate basically the level, and that's basically already it, to create some really fast swoosh sounds. And for that it's also really important to also have some spacey FX sounds like this echo sand, and also this time the shimmer here again has this super long and high frequency sound in it, and it's just smoothing this out really nicely. So to have those super short automations here in your fake sounds, it's really nice to just create some more tension rather than having a super long white noise swoosh in here. And also you can make this work together again with the other elements in the track. For example, this clap sound, as I said earlier, we want to have our stuff in here working together. And here we are creating a little nice up filter before these clap sounds are coming in. And yeah, that's basically already it for this whole track. I really hope you learned some new stuff and enjoyed watching this video. If so, please let me know by smashing that like and also leaving a comment down below. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.